two councillors who were stuck with that traffic jam. So good afternoon and welcome, fellow councillors, officers and members of the public to South Kesteven District Council Planning Committee on the 3rd of November 2022. I'm Councillor Penny Milnes, Vice Chair of Planning, and I will be chairing this meeting today. I'm not aware of any fire drill taking place today, so if the fire alarm does sound, then please vacate the building via the stairs, and the meeting place is outside at the front. Please can everyone ensure that they have turned their phones off or to silent. Thank you. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded and also being live streamed via YouTube. Could you ensure that your microphones are turned off when not speaking? We have with us today Assistant Director of Planning, Emma Whitaker, Principal Planning Officer, Adam Murray, Legal Services, Shem Sheikh, public speakers and ward councillors. Please be aware that you have 3 minutes to speak and you will be advised when you have 30 seconds left. You may finish your sentence, but not another paragraph. Emma, could you please read out the list of speakers, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So today in relation to agenda item number 4, which is application reference S220978, the former Shirley Croft Hotel site, we have 3 speakers today. We've got 2 against the application, that's Mr. Jim Smith and Mr. Mike Lane, and we've got the agent speaking for the application, Mr. Matt Hubbard. Thank you. Sorry, we've also got 2 ward councillors that wish to speak. We've got Councillor Adam Stokes and Councillor Charmaine Morgan has sent a statement to be read out.
Right, thank you. We'll now go to agenda item 1. Do we have apologies for absence?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor David Bellamy, Councillor Rosemary Caby-Brown, Councillor Penny Robbins and Councillor Judy Stevens. Councillor Robert Reid will be substituting for Councillor Rosemary Caby-Brown and Councillor Phil Dilks will be filling the Alliance SK vacancy for today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, do we have any disclosures of interest for consideration? No? If you believe you have at any point in the meeting, then please let us know. Item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of September. Is everyone happy with the accuracy of those minutes? Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wasn't at the meeting, but I have been contacted by Mr. Riley, who I believe made representation at that meeting. And I'd like to sort of ask if the my understanding was, and I followed the case, and I understood that what was agreed was that the clarification of the status of the breaches or alleged breaches of the existing 106 agreement would be sort of looked at, including the details of the affordable housing. I just wonder if it could be clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, of course. So the reason for the deferral was until all existing conditions have been complied with. And it also makes reference on page 11 of the agenda pack that it related to an amended motion to confirm the amount of affordable houses provided along with the clarification of the sewage arrangements. The affordable housing is what was in the section 106 in terms of the alleged breach, although it was confirmed at the time that they were not in breach at that moment in time. So I do think that's covered from my recollection, but obviously it's up to members to decide. And I don't know if any other members wishes to make comments that were there at the meeting.
Thank you.
Councillor Selby.
Madam Chairman, sorry to mention this, but we've yet to declare which members are actually here for the meeting today, and also note that we don't have a vice chairman here for this meeting. Do we formally need one, please? Thank you.
Amy, would you like to answer that?
Thank you. So I'll take the question about the vice chairman. No, you don't formally require one for today. Clearly, if there's any reason that Councillor Milnes needs to step away from the meeting, then we will either adjourn or we will vote another vice chair at that moment in time. But we don't need one. And I've clarified that with the Democratic Services Manager. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just take a roll call. So Councillor Penny Milnes,
Present.
Councillor Harish Bisnousing,
Present.
Councillor John Cottier,
Present.
Councillor Ian Selby,
Present.
Councillor Ian Stokes,
Present.
Councillor Paul Wood,
Yes, present.
and Councillor Phil Dilks,
Present, ma'am.
and Councillor Robert Reid.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. So is everyone happy with the accuracy of those minutes? Would someone like to propose the minutes?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not here as a committee member, but I was at the previous meeting, and so I would kind of echo Councillor Dilks's point that the sentence at the bottom of page 11 and the top of page 12 says the amended motion to confirm the amount of affordable homes provided, along with clarification of the sewage arrangements, doesn't actually make grammatical sense. This proposal was seconded with an amended motion to confirm the amount of affordable homes provided, along with the clarification of the sewage arrangements. Do we mean the number of homes already provided, or the number of homes to be provided, or the number of homes likely to be provided? And also, as Councillor Dilks pointed out, I'm sure that we asked for clarification, not just of the sewage arrangements, but also clarification of the breaches of the 106, the outstanding breaches of the 106.
Emma, would you like to comment again?
So obviously it's a decision for the planning committee that are voting, but you're correct in terms of it was, from my recollection, it was about the number of homes that had already been provided, affordable homes that had already been provided, because that related to whether there was a trigger passed in the section 106, meaning the potential breach in the 106. So members might like to, and I perhaps suggest that we add the word affordable homes already provided. Already provided. We add the word provided on top of page 12. And if members felt that it was appropriate, we could also include something that said, and to establish whether there are any other section 106 breaches, if members felt that that was a fair reflection of the meeting.
Councillor Bisnousing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was also going to raise this point because here in the minutes, it's not mentioned. It was proposed and also obviously seconded by somebody. And I would like to know who actually proposed it, and was there a vote taken on that?
It was proposed and it was seconded and it was voted from recollection. I haven't got my notes with me, but it was amended and was agreed, yes. We wouldn't ordinarily put that into the minutes, but if you'd like that information, I'm sure we can either go back and watch the YouTube video, or I might have it still in my notes somewhere.
Councillor Wood.
Madam Chairman, I'm quite happy with the minutes. I propose that we accept the minutes.
Do we have a seconder for that? Are we accepting them with the extra words that Emma has suggested? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bisnousing. go to the vote. There were only so many of us here at that meeting. So there's myself, Councillor Bisnath Singh, Councillor Selby and Councillor Paul Wood were at the meeting. So if we'd like to vote. Do we have any objections or abstentions? Abstentions to that? 2, 3, 4. They weren't here. I think. Thank you very much. We'll now go to agenda item number 4, application number S220978. And if we could have the planning officer presentation, please, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Yes, this is application S220978, and it is a full planning application for the erection of 9 houses and associated vehicular access at the former Shirley Croft Hotel site on Harrowby Road in Grantham. The application is being referred to committee as it's being called in by Councillor Charmaine Morgan as ward councillor and Councillor Adam Stokes due to concerns relating to the design quality, density of development and the impact on neighbouring properties. So the site's an area of about 0.36 hectares of land to the east of Harrowby Road and south of Croft Drive in the southeast of Grantham. The site was formerly occupied by the Shirley Croft Hotel, which was a large Victorian building with various additions and alterations, and that building was demolished in around about 2011. The site contains the remains of the former coach house in the eastern corner of the site, which is currently occupied as apartments, and the remainder of the site has been cleared for future development. The Harrowby Road frontage of the site is marked by a group of horse chestnut trees, a redwood tree, a holly tree, and a Scots pine tree. These trees, excluding the holly tree, are covered by a tree preservation order. Beyond those trees, the northern and western boundary is marked by a brick wall. The southern boundary is marked by close border fencing, showing the rear gardens of properties fronting on St Vincent's Road, and the eastern boundary is marked by a blockwork wall. There is an extant planning permission on the site for 8 dwellings, which was granted on appeal in October 2012. And that scheme has been partly implemented with the ongoing construction of plots 5 and 6 in the northeastern corner, fronting onto Croft Drive up here. As approved, that appeal scheme had 3 different house types. So plots 1 to 4 were 2 pairs of 3-storey semi-detached properties, which would have faced onto Harrowby Road. Plots 5 and 6, as they're referred to on that approved decision, which are the partially constructed properties, were detached properties fronting onto Croft Drive with a pedestrian access from Croft Drive and vehicular access to the rear from the approved private drive. And those were 2-storey properties with bedrooms in the roof space. Plots 7 and 8 are detached 1.5-storey properties that would be built at the rear of the site, so backing onto the eastern boundary. And then it's important to note as well that full planning permission was granted in October 2020 for the substitution of plots 1 and 2. So one of those pairs of 3-storey semi-detached properties to replace that with a single 3-storey detached property. So just for members' benefit, a couple of photos of the site. So the first photo on screen here is an image showing those part constructed properties, the ongoing construction fronting onto Croft Drive. An image then showing those trees on the Harrowby Road frontage that are covered by tree preservation order. And then next image is showing the former coach house that's situated on that eastern boundary that is currently occupied as apartments. And then an image here showing Ilex Cottage, which is a property to the south of the site fronting onto Harrowby Road, just showing the image sort of indicating the windows that they have looking into the site. And then finally, just from within the site looking south, you can see in the background there the properties that front onto St Vincent's Road and an existing garage that was approved as part of the appeal permission that has been built out and I believe is currently being used as a material store. So the scheme as we've got in front of us today, as I say, is a full application for 9 dwellings with associated vehicular access. In the scheme that we've got, the dwellings would be arranged around a central shared access drive, which would be taken from Harrowby Road. And plots 4 and 5 in that northeastern corner would continue to front onto Croft Drive. Those existing trees fronting onto Harrowby Road are to be retained with the exception of one of the horse chestnut trees, which is proposed to be felled. And the brick boundary wall onto Croft Drive and Harrowby Road would be retained and rebuilt as required. The internal rear boundaries are to be marked by close bordered fencing, and front boundaries would be marked by low level beech hedging. The scheme would be open market properties with 4 bed and 3 bed properties. 5 house types are proposed to be utilised on this scheme, which are 2-storey dwellings with some with accommodation in the roof space, so 2.5 storey, depending on how you want to describe them. Plots 1 and 2 would be detached 2-storey properties with bedrooms in the roof space and a single-storey addition to the rear. Plot 3 would also be a detached 2-storey property with bedroom in the roof space and again an addition in the rear, and then a dormer window on that side elevation. Plots 4 and 5, which are the partially built properties, are indicated as being altered to include an additional single-storey addition to the rear of those properties now, and plot 5 would also be served by a garage to the rear. And then plots 6 and 9 would be 2-storey dormer properties with single-storey additions and timber frame porches. And plots 7 and 8 would be a pair of semi-detached 2-storey properties, again with accommodation in that roof space and a single-storey addition with a flat roof garage to the side. In terms of the key issues for members to consider, there is the principle of development, design quality and visual impact, impact on neighbouring amenity and impact on trees. So just taking them in turn, principle of residential development on this site has been established by the approved appeal decision. The proposals would see an additional dwelling on the site beyond that approved at appeal, and that would be considered as windfall development on a brownfield site within Grantham. So as a matter of principle, it accords with the spatial strategy and would be acceptable. In terms of design quality, the scale of the properties would be consistent with residential properties in the area as present and would include a mixture of 2 and 3-storey properties, or 2.5 stories, as I say, depending on how you want to describe them. As you'll see in the report, it is accepted that there are some negative features in terms of the pro scheme. So plots 1 to 3 turn their back on the Harrowby Road frontage, which isn't reflective of the existing built form and necessarily reflective of principles of good design. But as it's set out in the report, these properties are well screened by the existing boundary wall and TPO trees. And likewise, there are some concerns in terms of the design of plots 1 and 2, particularly in terms of their the size of the gable features within those properties. However, on balance, the officer assessment is that the scheme would be an acceptable design quality and visual impact. In terms of residential amenity, as I say, the committee report goes into a full assessment of that, utilising the plan on the screen in front of you, and that has also been checked and verified. In short, the scheme would meet all the design guide standards in terms of residential amenity, in terms of separation standards, etc., to meet an acceptable standard in terms of privacy, outlook and overlooking. And then in terms of the impact on trees, members will note in the report there is a formal objection from the tree consultant to the proposals, particularly in relation to the concern that plots 2 and 3 are too close to those retained TPO trees. And that might lead to conflict in terms of dropping leaf litter, casting shade over those properties and just general overbearance. The applicant has provided additional plans which compare the current scheme with the potential impact from the appeal proposals, which indicate that the current scheme in front of us would provide betterment in terms of hard standing, being situated outside of those root protection areas. And just for members' information, we have had updated comments from the tree officers since the report was published, who has confirmed that they accept that the current proposals would provide betterment in terms of the impact on the root protection areas, but would say that the concerns that they have in terms of the current layout and the relationship of the properties with the tree protection or preservation orders still remain. So it is a matter for members to consider on balance in their decision making. So turning to the plan and balance and the overall recommendation, the officer's assessment is that the scheme would accord with the development plan as a whole, and there are no material considerations to indicate that planning permission should not be granted, although there are appropriate conditions recommended. So the recommendation is that the Assistant Director for Planning is authorised to grant planning permission subject to conditions. And I'll hand back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We now have move on to speakers. The first speaker, Councillor Charmaine Morgan, who is the ward councillor, has sent a statement which will be read out by Amy. Thank you. Sorry, we're just waiting for a photograph to be uploaded. Thank you. Right, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll now read Councillor Morgan's statement. I have served as a St Vincent's Ward Councillor for 3 terms and as a member of SKDC's Planning Committee for much of that time. I cannot attend today due to work commitments. However, I was present when SKDC members voted against the redevelopment of this site with concerns over the density and overbearing nature of the new development. Since this decision was overturned by a planning inspector, new proposals have further increased the density of housing and pushed development to the very edge of the site. I wish to refer back to the photograph of the original Victorian Shirley Croft Hotel building where Barnes Wallis invented the bouncing bomb. It was located in the centre of the plot, had adequate off-street parking to accommodate guests and was surrounded by beautiful mature landmark trees recognised by the tree officer in the planning report. The trees afforded privacy to neighbouring residents in the new development and would no doubt have been a material consideration at the time the surrounding bungalows and homes were built. This proposal is so crammed, it allows no space for landscaping to mitigate against the loss of privacy and light pollution from the new housing on neighbouring residents. Their gardens are cultivated or too small to add further significant screening. The new proposal pushes the development to the very edges of the site. It has already resulted in an unacceptable loss of valued trees on the site, which neighbours the St Anne's Conservation Area. The size and increased density of the new proposal is not only out of keeping with the character of St Vincent's Road and Croft Drive, but also Harrowby Road, which is for the large part line with Victorian terraces. The elevation and prominence of this site makes all material concerns raised all the worse, increasing the visual impact and impact of noise, light, and loss of privacy already experienced during building work. There is no plan provided which clearly illustrates the differing elevations and impacts on neighbouring properties for committee members to consider. I flagged this issue early in the planning process. This is unacceptable. If this development is approved, it will have a negative impact not only on the privacy and well-being of existing residents, a number of whom are vulnerable pensioners, but the new residents all crammed together with inadequate outside space. The site needs development urgently, but there is only one chance to get it right: a more sensitive design, lower level or more centred development with landscaping and less dense is needed. The developer could do better than this. We can do better than this. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Amy. Could ask councillor Adam Stokes, please, to speak. You have 3 minutes and you will be given a 30-second warning when you're about to finish that.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak against this application. I want to start off by saying that the residents are not against development on this site. In fact, they welcome it. However, it has to be the right development, which this application in front of you is not. The proposed scheme is, in my opinion, a significant departure from the previously inspector-approved scheme, where the neighbouring properties and residents discussed with the inspector at the time. The scheme that was approved back in 2012 was acceptable on a number of grounds with regards to layout and overlooking the neighbouring properties. I was involved back in 2012 as well. When the inspector approved that application, the majority of residents were happy with that final scheme, and I would have hoped that this developer would have continued with that extant permission. Whilst this new scheme is overdevelopment and also out of keeping, in my opinion, with certain plots changing dramatically from the extant permission, the 3 stories out of keeping with the surrounding area on that side of Harrowby Road, be it on Croft Drive or St Vincent's Road, these are primarily 2-story properties with bungalows also appearing at the beginning of Croft Drive, especially on the opposite side and next to the development. This would create a loss of light for a few properties on Croft Drive, whilst the loss of privacy also comes into play here. I've also had major concerns with the street scene. In communication with the agent, he stated that they're retaining more of the TPO trees with this layout. Whilst I acknowledge that all protected trees should be kept, it doesn't improve the street scene on Harrowby Road, with back gardens facing it rather than frontages that are seen up and down the road, and the street scene changing dramatically. The fact that in the original report that the tree officer is objecting to the current scheme shows that the plans are not correct at the moment, and that the layout needs another look. So that is more workable with the protected trees. So in conclusion, I'm not going to use all my 3 minutes, you'll be pleased to know. I hope that the committee listens to the concerns of the residents and asks that the developer looks again at this scheme. I believe that there is one that would meet the needs of them, whilst also being acceptable to the area and also the tree officer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry, councillor Selby. Yes.
Obviously, it's through the chair. As it's your area, Adam, county area that you represent, you obviously know it very well. Are there other 3-story properties in that particular area, please? Thank you.
So on the opposite side of the road, we have got Harrowby Road with they're mainly 2-story that side, but further across near the school, there are 3-story properties on the opposite side of Harrowby Road near the zebra crossing.
How far is that away from this particular application?
Probably about 50 yards, but
Okay,
but on this side of the road of Harrowby Road, it obviously backs onto Croft Drive, and you've got a bungalow next door to it on Harrowby Road. So on this side, there are no 3-story within the vicinity on that side of the road.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, councillor Stokes. Oh, do apologise. Councillor Dilks.
In the open questions, not.
If I could call Jim Smith, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith. You have 3 minutes and you will be warned at the 30-second point. So when you're ready to start, if you could just press the button for your microphone.
What on?
Yeah, that's it.
What, so we're on now, yeah, okay, sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. If you'd
Thank
like
you.
to
Sorry
start
about
when you're
that.
ready. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I am Jim Smith, live at 14 Croft Drive in Grantham. Been there for 24 years. I'm going against this new proposal. Basically because the development is too dense. Each new house that they're planning to put in, walls and fences are too near to the houses that's already there. The two houses that's already been built on Croft Drive are large detached houses that look three stories high. One was built first and then the second one is still being built. The second one has a large window in the side of it, which overlooks number 13 Croft Drive, which is a bungalow, and it looks straight into my back garden on number 14. So privacy. And the house that's going to be built at the bottom of my garden on my between my boundary and number 15 is a 3-story. Well, it looks like a 3-story to me because they've got windows in the roofs. There's 3 windows in the roofs, which directly, if they look across, they can look into my garden, number 14's garden, number 15's garden. Now, my wife's a keen gardener. We've got a fantastic garden. And she likes to, do a garden and all that. In the summer, she likes to appreciate the garden like we all do. She sits outside in a lounge, just shorts on, reads books and all that. Well, she won't be able to do that anymore because these new houses here will be overlooking the property and privacy will be gone. My grandkids come round quite often, use the small pool that we've got, and all that'll be gone. But basically, this will ruin a lot of lives on Croft Drive. I mean, it's we're not against
30 seconds.
we're not against it, but we want the right sort of properties put up so that it don't interfere with us and ruin all Croft Drive's lives. How many seconds? Is that it?
You've got 10 seconds left.
10 seconds, yeah. So that's what I want about. Too big a property, too dense, and the guy not caring of what he's doing to the locals, ruining people's lives.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay,
Mr.
sorry I'm a
Smith.
bit,
Thank you.
but all new to me.
Did very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith. Will you? If you'd like to just come back a minute.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right. Has anybody any questions for Mr. Smith, please?
I've shut him up, have I? I'm not an ogre, I'm just a guy that comes from the art and loves his where he lives and the street.
Thank you very much,
Madam
Mr.
Chairman.
Smith. That's
Yeah, questions, Madam Chairman, if I just ask how long you've lived in the area, please, Mr. Smith?
How long have I been there?
Yes, please.
23 years. We have got some there that's been there. We have got some there that's been there 55 years. Some of the old people. It's really going to affect them as well. Okay.
right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
indeed.
Thank you very much.
you.
Sorry to be a bit of a, but I'm not, as you can see, I'm not used to this sort of stuff.
Well, you've done very well. Thank you
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you. Switch it off.
Right. Thank you. If we could ask Mike Lane, please. Thank you. Right, thank you, Mr. Lane. You also have 3 minutes and you'll be given the 30-second warning. Thank you.
I won't be that long. I'd just like to say my privacy is already affected and impacted greatly by the completed plots 4 and 5. I live in the bungalow opposite those two houses, and being in a bungalow, I'm now dwarfed by these two great houses, which affects my privacy. If you look out the windows of those two houses, they can see right through into my lounge, my kitchen, my hallway, and right into my back garden if the doors are open. So it has affected me greatly. So there is a marked difference in the visual impact that I now see. Our outcome will also be affected by the proposed development, because obviously at the moment we can see we get a great big deal of daylight. With that site being so congested, we're going to lose that with the development, especially as it's now increased in number. The other thing I want to say, I feel there's not enough allocated parking for the development either, provision, especially when people will be bringing in work vehicles and visitors for the size of this development. Overflow parking will be in Croft Drive, as there will be 2 pedestrian accesses at least from Croft Drive. This will greatly impact my access and egress out of my property, because the road is quite narrow and there is not a lot of room to get past the boundary and turn into the Croft Drive. And it happens now with the school run, but obviously with the school, it's only for a short duration, so we manage that and we don't try to get the vehicles out during that time. But with vehicles parked there all the time, that's almost going to be impossible at all times if there's vehicles parked right outside my gates. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Lane? No? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lane. Thank you. If I could now call the agent, Matt Hubbard, please. Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, you also have 3 minutes and a 30-second warning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 4 slides to show. Can I just wait until they're ready on the screen? Is that okay? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Adam. The application that is before you must be considered in relation to the extant planning permission for the development of the site, which is a material consideration in the determination of this application. Concerns have been raised in relation to the potential loss of trees from the site. The plan on the screen shows how the approved development will sit in relation to the trees when compared to the development as now proposed. It is evident now that the RPA has been accurately plotted that the approved development will be harmful to many of the trees and will potentially lead to the removal of T7 and T8 accordingly. There are also extensive areas of car parking and roadway within those RPAs. The proposed development, however, avoids any incursion into the RPAs and shows that the trees will be protected and the built form will move away from the adjacent roads accordingly. Slide 2. The size and scale of the proposed development has also raised a concern. Slide 2 shows that the 2-storey elements of the proposed development, shown by the dark blue lines, is concentrated within the central core of the site and will not adversely impact on any of the adjacent properties or the street scene in general. The lower properties are shown in light blue on the plan, with all other elements shown being grey as single storey only. You will see from this that the proposal will have no harmful impacts on the neighbouring properties or the street scene in general. The third slide serves to show the proposed development is preferable in terms of overall design, will be of a reduced scale when compared to the approved development, and will be a vast improvement in terms of a reduction in bulk, massing, and from the poor house types that have already been approved for this site. The comparison drawing at the bottom of this plan shows how the proposed dwellings will appear from Croft Drive when compared to the huge side gable of plot 1 as approved for construction. Our proposal is far more sympathetic in terms of design, scale, bulk, massing, and in relation to the trees to be retained. Concerns have also been raised that the proposed development will be out of keeping with the character of the surrounding area and does not reflect the surrounding properties. Photographs shown on slide 4 show the existing dwellings that surround the site. It is clear from this that there is no prevailing character within this area, and there is no local vernacular to follow in terms of scale and design, as the area is mixed in terms of built form. Mindful of the comparison drawings that you've seen, I would argue strongly that we can provide something much better and much more sympathetic for this site than what has been approved. I urge you to draw the same conclusions in making the decision on this application. We have proven to the council that the proposal meets the guidance put forward in the adopted design guide, and that, as a matter of fact, the approved development does not. The report that is before you addresses all of the other design matters, and in each case, the report confirms full compliance with national planning guidance and local planning policy. To conclude, I respectfully urge members to uphold the officer's recommendation and approve this development accordingly. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, please, to Matt? Councillor Instoke?
Madam Chairman. Yes, are you proposing to rebuild the wall adjacent to Harrowby Road? Because there's a danger that it's going to fall down in places. And the actual wall that you've put up on Croft Drive, you're building, is an absolute disgrace unless you're going to do something different. Looks like a baby's done it.
Chairman, through you, there is a boundary condition, I think, suggested by the planning officer, so that could be picked up within that. But it would be our intention certainly to repair and make good the existing walls and boundary details to the external sides of the site as it stands. And then the boundary condition would also cover us for the internal boundaries within the site as well.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm a bit confused, if I may say so. And I wonder if you could just clarify, please, about the trees. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that the extant planning permission that you have said it would retain all the mature trees. But now the revised planning permission that you're coming for an application for today suggests that some of the trees are going to go. I also understand some have already been felled. Is that since the original planning permission was granted? And could you just sort of clarify? I think in the report, the arboriculturist report says that 2 particular trees have gone, T1 and T3. If you could just fill us in as to what's happened to them, and really clarify what you sort of mean by sort of saying that this new application is going to be better protection for the trees. What's changed, please? Thank you.
Through you, Chairman. It might help if my slide 1 can be back on the screen actually for this, because the plans do show that. The extent of the trees that have been removed, I'm not completely certain on that, but there's nothing that's been removed from the site already that isn't dealt with within our tree report that's submitted as part of the planning application. The plan that should pop up on the screen shortly will show the comparison between the approved development on the left and the proposed development on the right. So the trees are shown there in green with the black dots at the centre. My initial comments when speaking were that the approved scheme on the left-hand side will result in potentially more harm to those existing trees. And in the very top left-hand corner, I don't know if we can get that that slide bigger, in the very top left-hand corner, you'll see the holly tree is actually within the turning head, so that would potentially have to go if the extant permission was developed. And there's a tree immediately adjacent to the access road there as well, which also creeps into the RPA of which actually creeps into plot 1 as well. So that one would be under threat as well if the extant permission was built out. If you transfer that across to the plan on the right, you can see how we've moved the dwellings and all of the hard standing areas away from those trees. So the initial benefit there is that we can certainly keep T7 and T8 in situ, and that would be conditioned and protected as part of both the TPO and the planning permission.
If I might come back, Madam Chairman, thank you for that. I'm looking at paragraph 2.5 in the report that I'm sure you've got in front of you, page 22. And it says the existing this is the arboriculturalist's objection to the application. This is the planning officer's description of the proposal. And it says the existing horse chestnut trees along the Harrowby Road frontage are shown as being retained, with the exception of T1 and T3, which have already been felled, and T2, which is proposed to be felled and is located within the rear garden space of plot 1. Is that not right?
That's potentially right, Chairman. I don't have the plan in front of me. I don't have the agenda report in front of me either, but I don't know whether that can be shown on the drawings as to where those trees are. I know the report that we have submitted is seeking the removal of a further tree as part of the report, but I'm not sure what has physically gone from the site in the build up to the submission of this planning application. No.
I think what I'm asking is, and I don't know if Adam might be able to help us, is what was T1 and T3? Were they mature horse chestnuts, and have they gone?
Adam, can we ask you to comment on that, please?
Yeah, I can just clarify on that for you, councillors. So in terms of the species, I believe they were also mature horse chestnut trees. And yeah, it's T1 and T3 which have already been removed from the site. That has been considered by the council's arboriculturalist, and they were those works were already carried out, and they were satisfied that had been done under the existing consent.
Done with consent?
Done with the existing consent, I believe.
Under
yes.
the previous under the extant planning permission?
That's correct, councillor, yes.
Then I was wrong when I said that I understood that planning permission protected all the trees. It didn't.
It protected the remainder of those trees, but yeah, as part of that appeal permission, it was already accepted. I believe that those two trees that have been felled were accepted as being felled.
And what the applicant is saying today is that that the proposed planning permission will actually protect more of the trees. That's right, isn't it? That's what you're saying.
Through you, Chairman. Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Are you happy with that? I think what the applicant is saying is that the original scheme invaded the root protection area, whereas this scheme is on the edge and beyond the root protection area. I also think, and I stand to be corrected, Adam, that the horse chestnuts had minor leaf or something like that wrong with them. I think they had a disease. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe you may be correct on that, Madam Chair. If I just to clarify the point in terms of the existing consent and how the current permission relates to that. What is being shown by the applicant is effectively that when they have done the tree survey as part of the current application, they have more accurately plotted what the root protection areas are of those trees. And it's basically shown that what was originally shown on the appeal scheme, so the approved scheme for those root protection areas, actually underestimates what the correct root protection areas are of those trees. So what the image that the applicant has shown on the screen is that effectively if you take what the accurate root protection areas are of those trees and impose that upon what could be built out under the existing scheme, you actually see that the existing scheme, if built out, would encroach on those root protection areas, as opposed to now where if you look at the current application in front of you and have those root protection areas on them, the hard standing areas have been extended so that they're excluded from those correct root protection areas.
Thank you. I mean, I'm reading the arboriculturalist report and there's no mention of disease to any of these trees in the arboriculturalist report. It actually talks about no evidence of significant excavation or root damage, and that they have healthy leaf growth, indicating no signs of stress. And his or her recommendation is that the proposal is not workable from an arboricultural perspective, and suggests a new layout, a better design layout to allow the retention of trees 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I mean, I don't know if I can get clarification on that. It just seems to be a bit confusing.
I think if I'm correct in saying, councillor, that your suggestion or mention of disease was for the trees that have been felled already? Is that was correct, wasn't it?
That's correct. The trees that have already been felled were mainly horse chestnuts that had some disease. Yeah. I think I'm right in saying that the current council arboriculturalist does have some issues with the positioning of the trees in private rear gardens and the closeness of the dwellings. Am I correct?
Yeah, so if I just confirm on that point, councillor, so the point in terms of disease, as you say, that relates to the trees that have already been felled. The trees that are being retained, as you correctly say, councillor, as the arboriculturalist has picked up, they assessed them and felt that they were in good condition, no signs of disease or anything like that, so no justification for them to be removed. And it's on that basis and based on that updated assessment that they've got concerns with the current application in terms of potential issues of overshadowing, leaf litter being dropped, etc., for those plots within that area.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A question for Matt Hubbard, really. The original planning application was for 8. This application we're considering now is 9. How would you answer the concerns that initially it looks to me like a overdevelopment, and in particular, plot 3 looks a little bit crammed in?
Chairman, through you, again, I don't know if we can get slide 2 back up on the screen. What that shows or served to show is that the main built form and bulk of the development is concentrated in the centre of the site, which is where the 2.5 story elements of the development will be. Looking at that plan, if it pops up on the screen now, that shows where there will be 2.5, where there'll be 1.5 story, and the elements that are single story. So what we've tried to do through this layout, and again, it's all been tested against the design guide details, the adopted design guide specifications. It works in terms of light levels, it works in terms of window positions, overlooking, but it also works in terms of scale and massing because of the way we've laid the site out and tried to put the taller elements within the centre of the site. The comparison slides that I showed as well obviously show that our tallest houses are still best part of 1 metre, more than 1 metre lower than the ones that are actually approved for the site as well. So we're trying to bring down the scale and massing accordingly, if that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Selby.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Through yourself to Mr. Hubbard. I want to go back to the question about street scene, please. And I wanted to ask a question that Councillor Stokes touched upon, which we haven't had clarification on, with regarding that wall that's been built on Croft Road, the one that's directly outside properties number 4 and number 5, and in particular number 4 that as we know now totally overlooks the property across the road. Is that wall that's been built? Have you actually seen it? And can you tell us, is that going to be rendered or what is actually, because a blind man could have built that wall better than that, I have to say. And when I see a wall in that sort of condition, and I see that particular property number 4 totally overlooking the one across the road, it doesn't inspire confidence to me, Madam Chairman. And I'd like to ask that question to you, please, Ms. Dobbin. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. I have seen the wall, yes. The wall's actually been built up against the fence. So elements of where the fence has been removed, you can see recesses in the wall itself where it looks to have abutted that fence as well. I'm not sure there was a slide in the presentation that showed that. It would be our intention to make good where possible that wall along Croft Drive and bring that back to its what would have been its original condition, if that's fair to say.
Thank you. Councillor Bisnal Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, with regards to the route, you know, T9 and T10 has been removed. There's the one that's right by the pavements, by the footpath.
These two up here, councillor.
Yes, those two. Yeah, and also number 7, it's a redwood, T7. It's mentioned is to be, the holy tree will be removed, but that is not removed as yet. Take it.
Who's best to reply to that? Do you think, Adam?
Yes, councillor. So T7, the holly tree, that is there at present.
Is that as a concern was for preserving the trees? I believe, will that be eventually removed, or is that at the moment, you know, that can be saved?
The T7 shown on the proposed plan that we've got shows that as being retained.
Right, okay. Now I'll come back to T9 and T10 removed, because I noticed yesterday, because looking at the xylem and the phloem of the fruit of the tree cut right across it, that is the center core of the tree and the outside of it, where most of the conductivity food travels within the trees. I can't see any sign of deterioration or even split on those trees. And yet seeing the roots across, I pointed out, that the roots is actually going across the pavements and the roads is lifting it up. So will that be eventually removed completely and the footpaths made good? Because next to it also you got a drive that's going to be coming across there, which actually the RPA hasn't been extended to the possibility of the roots still being underground, which will affect the walls of the building.
I'm not quite clear what the question is there then.
My question is that going to stay as it is there? Or is that going to be removed totally now? Is that it has already been cut?
Right, okay. So with T9 and T10, as you say, where they've been partly removed already, yes. So the expectation would be got the condition in place there for boundary treatments. You would assume that to actually deliver those boundary treatments, it would need the remainder of those trees to be fully sort of excavated as it was.
So will the wall continue, the wall that is half built, because that councillor just mentioned about, will that continue over that place or not?
Correct, councillor, as I say, so the expectation is that the boundary wall would extend along the Croft Drive frontage, and then you've got the wall that comes along the Harrowby Road frontage. So you would have a wall that would go all along that northern and then western boundary.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I come back again? This 0.8 acre of the whole site, what is the actual site covered by the 3 plot in that corner there? What is the total with the 3 building in there? What's the sort of density of the plot? Has been already asked.
I'll be honest, councillor, I don't have that information to hand in terms of the actual sort of density within that area of the site specifically. I've got the information to hand and it's in the report in terms of the density of development across the site as a whole, but I don't have the information to hand in terms of within that small part of the site and what that density would be.
Thank you. No more question.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's good to be with you again. Can I have a point of information clarity, please, to Adam or Emma? It's in relation to the loss of privacy and intrusive design. do I remember correctly that there's supposed to be 20 metres between an existing dwelling and the siting of a new one? Can I learn that first?
So the adopted standards that we have in place vary depending on essentially whether it's a habitable window to a blank elevation. So in that situation, if you have a habitable window looking to a blank elevation, the separation distance is 14 metres. If you have two-storey properties and you've got habitable windows to habitable windows, the separation distance in place is 21 metres.
So can I ask the applicant whether this application complies with that criteria, please? Through you, Chair.
Chairman, through you, yes, it does. There was a slide shown earlier which was submitted by us partway through the consideration of the planning. That's the one. Through the consideration of the planning application, we've gone through that dwelling by dwelling, window by window effectively, and gone through the process of dealing with 45-degree rules, 25-degree rules for light coming into windows, separation distances as well. What we have found in doing that is that the approved scheme for the site, which could be developed, doesn't meet those requirements. The dwellings are far closer. They would fail the separation distances, and on I think 2 extents would fail the light issues as well. So again, that's part of why we're suggesting this would be an improvement in terms of overall layout.
Thank you.
Well, yes, because that is the applicant's view of it. I'd like to know from our officers whether the previous design did actually match the criteria, or is it something that the inspector overlooked at that time?
Adam,
I
can
think
you
the
answer
first thing that councillors need to be mindful of is that we have to assess the scheme in front of us to start off with and whether that is acceptable. So we have gone through the plans that has been submitted, including the one on the screen now, and checked those distances as well ourselves using the technology that we have and assess the various standards in place. And yes, we are comfortable that the scheme in front of us does meet those adopted design guidance. Now, in terms of the appeal scheme, that's obviously a material consideration and as a fallback position. What I would say though is it's not necessarily correct to say that the inspector considering that appeal overlooked things in terms of design, the separation distances, because that was a key thing that was considered at that point in time. It was one of the key issues considered in that appeal, and the inspector found that it was acceptable, but also being mindful of the standards that we have in place now were adopted at the end of last year in terms of those 21 metre standards, etc. So they weren't in place when that original appeal was considered. So at that point, it wasn't necessarily a more subjective assessment, but it didn't have the benefit of those clear sort of strong standards that we do now have in place.
Councillor Selby, do you have a different question to ask?
Is clarification, please, Madam Chairman, with regarding the question that Councillor Bisnorsing asked with regarding the tree roots. Will the tree roots be removed in accordance with page 52, where it states number 14, before any part of the development hereby permitted is occupied, all hard and soft landscaping works shall have been carried out in accordance with the approved landscaping details? So I'm assuming those tree roots and the pathway there is covered under that particular item. Can you just clarify if that is the case, which it should be? And also, can I just say as well, Madam Chairman, just take this opportunity while I'm speaking, to thank Adam Murray for the wonderful agenda plans that we've got today, Madam Chairman. You can actually see what we've got here in front of us instead of having to bring me magnifying glass, Madam Chairman. So it's a breath of fresh air, and thank you very much, Adam, for that. Thank you.
Okay, well, Emma, you can reply.
Thank you. I've happen to have got the conditions open, so I can give you a quick answer. It's actually condition 6 that is the relevant condition. So condition 6 requires details of tree protection scheme for retained trees. But also in relation to the tree report, I've seen some references to methods of construction. So quite often you'll want protection fencing put up, but you'll also need to control things like the method of digging. So you might use an air spade so that you don't sever the roots when you're doing construction. So we will make sure that that is controlled should the committee be minded to approve this.
Thank you. Well, I think that ends those questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Hubbard. Thank you. We seem to have had quite a lot of questions to the presenting officer as a result of all the questions. Do we have any other questions for the presenting officer? Councillor Stokes.
Yes, on the revised plans, could you say how the root structure of these retained trees is going to impact on the new 3 houses that you've got?
Sorry, councillor, can you just repeat that for me, please?
Oh dear, can't remember what's that now. Put the tape recorder back on. The tree structure under the ground where the trees grow, the roots, how do they impact on the site of the new? Will they go underneath or will they go right to the boundary of the houses? There must be a way of working out where the root structure goes.
Yeah, so I think we've got a plan. Bear with me 1 second, councillor. It's actually this plan that's provided by the agent is probably the best one to showcase it. So this plan on the right, you can see a red dotted line here, which shows the extent of the root protection areas and just shows that in relation to those 3 plots on that Harrowby Road site. So it just shows that the actual hard standing and those plots themselves are just outside of those root protection areas.
It looks a bit wavy, as if it's sort of deliberately drawn so that it doesn't go underneath the housing. It probably isn't, but it does look it from the way you look at plans.
Yes, Emma, would you like to make another comment?
That is usually how they are drawn. I think I've been told previously as a rule of thumb, the roots probably extend out as far as the canopy, but they have calculations so they can work out using the species of the tree and other bits and pieces. I'm not a tree expert, so they can accurately come up with that root protection zone. And as I understand it, it probably overestimates where those trees are, because if you ask any tree officer, they probably do not want to lose the trees if they can save them. So it will always look a bit wobbly or like a cloud drawn around the trees, but that's because that's reflective of the trees and where their roots are growing.
Councillor Viswanathan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Following on from that questions, why is actually the RPA for T9 and T10 not been shown? Because considering the trunk girth seems to be similar to the others that extend to the RPA line of the T8, T6 and T5s, all those trees, because extending those, that will give you a far better understanding of how far the root goes under the new, those 3 buildings. And also it will spread out alongside, because that hasn't been removed as was confirmed earlier.
To be honest, councillor, I can't give you an answer for why those root protection areas haven't been shown. It's as I say, that arboricultural report has been consulted on with our tree consultant, and it's not something that they've picked up in that. But appreciate obviously where you're coming from with those concerns. Like as you say, those roots are still present on the site. So again, would still be a consideration at this point.
Thank you. Are we ready to move into debate? I'm going to suggest we have a structured debate at 3 sections. So I think if we could take overlooking first and then move on to the impact on the trees, and then maybe onto the design and the total impact on the street scene, and then any other issues we'd like to raise, just to keep things a bit clear. If we could just focus on one at a time. So if we took overlooking first, we've heard from the objectors. Who would like to start? Councillor Reid.
Well, thank you for the information that I've asked. Clearly, from what I've learnt this afternoon, despite understanding the concerns and the passion of the impact on neighbours, this application, on the grounds of being overlooked, meets the criteria. So unless somebody can explain to me that it doesn't, then that wouldn't be a ground or reason, sadly, for objection. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Reid. If I could just ask Adam to clarify that where we've got windows on the third floor effectively, that they are opaque and non-opening, is that correct?
Where relevant in terms of, yeah, if there is issues potentially with overlooking, then there are conditions in place for the relevant windows to be obscure glazed.
Thank you. Anybody else like to comment on the overlooking issue? So if we could move on to the impact on the trees that councillor Bisnothing.
The previous one, what actually Adam just confirmed, would that be done retrospectively after the completions of the work, or is going to be done during the construction?
So the relevant condition is conditional 11, so it's page 51 of your agenda, councillor, and the trigger point on that condition is that before the development is occupied, those windows shall be obscure glazed.
Councillor Selby.
Yeah, just ask for clarification, Madam Chairman, with regarding properties number 4 and 5, is it correct, I believe, that they were passed on appeal with regarding the overlooking issue on that?
I understand that those two that are built, you're talking about, yes, they were approved on appeal in 2012. Adam, could you also confirm that majorly any of those high up windows are either obscured or they're bathroom windows? Is that...
To be honest with the appeal scheme, unfortunately, councillor, I don't have the conditions to hand with that one. So,
sorry, on this one, sorry.
as I say, in terms of the relevant properties, we can. So with the change to the scheme, we can obscure glaze those windows. I think it wouldn't necessarily meet the test of soundness for us to put a condition in to say that those properties that have been constructed should have to have obscure glazing, because effectively they can be built out as they have been approved. So that is a fallback position that has to be considered with that.
Yes, thank you. I think we appreciate that they've already got permission and been built. Thank you. On then to the impact on the trees. Who would like to start the debate? Councillor Dilk?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's unusual in my experience on this planning committee to have such a strong, well, any objection, frankly, from an arboriculturalist. But certainly I haven't seen one as strong an objection from an arboriculturalist to any application in the past as this one. And I'll just, remind you it's a very strong objection. He advises that in paragraph 513, that the proposal is not workable from an arboricultural perspective, and suggests that it could be realigned to actually retain more of the trees. He advises in the previous paragraph 513(6) that 2 of the units are too close to the trees, and that, in his experience, what will happen here is that the residents would feel that those trees are overbearing to their dwellings and would limit their amenity space, which is nearly all of which it says is impacted by the trees, and that would could lead to pressure to remove the trees, resulting in a loss of amenity. But perhaps the strongest bit is in paragraph 513(5), higher up, and I'll just read it out. The remaining horse chestnut trees, and we saw the pictures of them. The very first picture we saw was magnificent horse chestnut trees. And I've got to say, I do speak in the context of in my ward, my neighbouring ward. It's about 10 yards out of my ward. Right now, as we speak, a magnificent horse chestnut tree, a mature one, is being felled. I've got to say that it's nothing to do with this council. This council is not involved in that crime, if it is indeed a crime. I haven't got to the bottom of why this particular tree is being felled. It may be it's on police land. I'm not sure yet, so I don't want to say too much about that one. But trees are important, Madam Chairman. They are recognised as important. You know, not only are they good for our mental well-being, post-pandemic particularly, but in terms of climate change and the role that they play in carbon absorption, if I could call it that. And as the arboriculture says in paragraph 513.5, and I'll be quiet after I've said this, he says, or she says, the remaining horse chestnut trees have a high degree of merit as a public visual amenity. These are an historic green feature in a densely built up part of town whose loss will harm the appearance of the surrounding street scene. I rest my case. And that's before we get on to design. And I have huge sympathy. I'll not comment on design. I'll finish now, if I may just say, you know, it's also unusual not just to have an arboriculturalist's real strong objection to a planning application. It's unusual to have 3 ward councillors coming today. I appreciate Charmaine Morgan wasn't able to be here, but also I know Councillor Graham Gill has put in a similar objection, mainly on design, as indeed Councillor Stokes has. And I just think we should listen to them, and we should listen to the arboriculturalist. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Chairman, yeah, I do agree with Councillor Dilks. Actually, reading those paragraphs of what's been said, it is quite clear. 513.7, where they say, I would suggest that the layout is realigned to show the retention of the trees. So it clearly is a very important issue. So I think Councillor Dilks has made the point very well, and I agree with this one. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Selby.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I'd just like to comment on the trees, Madam Chairman. As you know, I was on the site visit. We didn't actually see the trees in full bloom, obviously with it being autumn now, Madam Chairman. But I took some photos of the trees, and I've got one here in front of me. And there's one tree in particular. I think it's T6, I'm not exactly sure, but that is an absolutely beautiful tree, Madam. It's wonderful. I've got a tree in my ward, Madam Chairman. It's known as the Grantham Oak. Fabulous tree. It's so valued in our community, Madam Chairman. And these trees, they are an historic feature of the town. And these in particular, they really are beautiful. And that particular tree, I think if it is T6, it's got to be one of the most beautiful trees in our town. And we must do everything we can to protect it, just as we have. The council's gone to great measures to protect the Grantham Oak on Belton Lane, Madam Chairman. And all measures should be done exactly the same for these particular trees. So yes, I'm all in favour of doing everything we can to protect these trees, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Emma to say something, please?
Thank you. Trees are absolutely important, and they're good for all sorts of reasons, whether it's softening the development, it's just to make it look nicer in the street scene. They've obviously got climate change benefits. There's a whole sort of good reasons why we should retain trees. In terms of T5, 4, 5 and 6, they're proposed to be retained. The tree officer or consultant has raised some concerns, and they're set out in the report, and you're quite right to acknowledge those concerns. And what he's basically talking about is something that's known as post-development tree resentment. So it's where people move into houses thinking they're all nice and lovely, and then season or two later of clearing up the leaves, they don't like the trees any longer. So we do come under pressure sometimes to have those trees felled or reduced in terms of their canopy size, which can cause an impact in terms of their visual appearance. We can resist that, because if there isn't a good reason to have those works or to approve those works, because these are protected trees, then we can as a council resist that, because they'll need to make the application to us. But we do have to be sensible and mindful that there does come a point in time where you have to be pragmatic. So I can't say that at some point in the future we wouldn't be asked to have works done to those trees, and that at some point in the future those trees would not be consented to be removed. They would be replaced in all likelihood, but not, I can't say for certain they're not. What the tree officer has subsequently said, and what Adam pointed out, and you can read the comments again if it assists you, is that taking into account the approved permission, which is extant, so it's a live permission, it's been implemented, that situation is probably worse for the trees. You've got a lot of hard standing and parking areas over those tree roots, and that now they've plotted the trees and they've calculated the root protection zones. What you've got is probably more harmful to those trees. So it's a balanced judgment. So yes, it's absolutely right to consider the issue of post-development tree resentment. I do like that phrase. But there is a fallback position here that you need to have regard to. And if that fallback position is worse than this position, then it would be difficult to sustain a reason for refusal purely on impact on those trees. But that's something that you as the planning committee need to decide. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I wonder if I might just come back on that. Thank you, Emma, for pointing out. But where does it say in the arboriculturalist report that the proposal may well be worse for the trees than the extant planning permission? I don't see that in here. And whilst I see that part of what what might happen in the future is part of what he's saying, he's also saying the trees are too close to what's proposed is too close to the existing trees. And of course, it talks about the high degree of merit that those trees have right now.
So the tree officer, the tree consultant, in his comments, which are in the papers in front of you, has commented purely on the proposed plans in front of him. And he's raised concerns that due to the proximity of those trees to the properties and the fact that they're quite prominent within the gardens, he's concerned about what might happen in the future, which is not necessarily an ideal situation. I'll ask Adam to reread the additional comments that the tree officer has made, because Adam has asked the tree officer for his view in light of, and apologies if that perhaps wasn't made clear earlier, but he's asked for a view in light of the earlier permission, which the tree consultant may not have been aware of when he made these comments, because he would have been assessing purely on this application. That's not the incorrect approach, but obviously, as you know, members in planning, we do have to consider the fallback position. So Adam, would you like to just clarify those comments, please?
Yeah, so if I the best way to almost distinguish it between it is what we've got now and what the tree officers commented on is effectively what members are being asked to consider as a balanced position between above ground constraints with relation to trees and below ground constraints in relation to the trees. So what the tree officer has said based on the plans that we've had with those updated root protection areas is that he does accept that the current scheme, so the current application, would be better than the appeal scheme in terms of those below ground constraints, because the hard standing is now situated outside of those root protection areas. Now that betterment against the fallback position has to then be weighed against what is perceived in terms of, as Councillor Dilks has pointed out, those comments that the officers raised in terms of the above ground situation and the potential pressure on those trees from pruning due to potential overbearance and loss of light for the proposed properties. So effectively, it's for members to consider whether the betterment on the below ground constraints would outweigh the potential concerns and post-development stress, or however everyone's phrased it, for the scheme in terms of balancing those two potential factors together.
Can I say, Mr. Madam Chairman, I'm very disappointed that we haven't had that as a written report. I don't know why, why they should be late comments is one thing, but even with late comments, we get them normally as an additional report, as an extra paper. And it's just been thrown in right at the end, just before we vote, as a, to support the recommendation. I'm very disappointed in that. Thank you.
I think part of the issue with the trees in the current proposal is that they are in private back gardens effectively, and therefore if they were in a more managed space, they would have less of this post-development resentment or whatever it's called. I can understand it because I think the tree officer is saying that most of those gardens will be under the canopy of the trees. So there'll be a lot of shade and it won't be very usable. So that probably is where the pressure on the trees will come in that dimension. So it's a different stress. It's a different impact.
Yeah, that's effectively it, councillor. Two different factors that you're having to weigh up.
Would anybody else like to comment? Councillor Bisnath?
Yes, I'm really concerned about the trees. I'm concerned also about the path, the driveway that's going to be skirting just close to T8. Will the T8 be given more space, the drive can be rerouted, or is that going to be eventually removed? Even though it's not mentioned here. The drive is very close to T8 and yet there's no proposal what to do with it.
I'll be honest, councillor, I'm a little bit confused because T8's along that northern boundary and the driveway runs through the centre of the site. So the actual access driveway doesn't go near to where T8 is shown.
Okay, you happy? All right, does anybody else like to comment on the impact on the trees? We could now move on because it is sort of interrelated to the design and the overall impact on the street scene and what we think of that. So would anybody like to start the debate on that element of the issues? Councillor Stokes?
Oh, why not? It would appear that the developer is trying to put these trees, I know these trees again, into the back gardens of these houses. Now, surely the design of the area should have made the trees outside, and all these three-storey houses, which are too large anyway, should have been away from the trees and not within their gardens.
Would anybody else like to comment on this broader element? Councillor Reid?
Yeah, broader development. Does it meet the criteria of overdevelopment or not? Because I don't think it does it?
I think Emma can answer that one.
Overdevelopment's a really interesting response. In one sort of sense, overdevelopment is not something in itself. It is a product of something else. So you might say that it's cramped and there's not enough garden space, there's not enough car parking, there's not enough turning heads, there's not enough something else, and therefore it's overdeveloped. But you can't just say it's overdeveloped and there are no standards. Overdeveloped is a product of why it's a poor layout and a poor design, but there isn't something that you can just go, yeah, that's overdeveloped. It's a case of considering the components of the application and the issues.
Yeah, if I can just come back on that then, because the application is for 9. Now, the appeal was and was approved for 8. Now, the applicant is telling us that it's a better design. The ward councillors and members of the public are telling us that it's not. So we've got to work out within the law what the policy dictates, whether it is or not. So therefore, is 9 houses on this particular plot considered to be overdevelopment, please?
Yes, Emma.
So the officer's recommendation is to approve. So the officer's view is it is not overdevelopment of the site. You could look at it in a flip way. This is an urban area. It's an area where the local plan is very clear we need to be directing our growth, or a lot of our growth. A lot of it is directed towards the Grantham area, and therefore this makes an efficient use of the land. And that's what we're also tasked at doing in the National Planning Policy Framework. Just because a site's got permission for 8, it doesn't mean you can't redesign it in a different way. Another example might be if you've got a building that is proposed to be subdivided into, say, 4 flats. So you're increasing the density by 4-fold. That doesn't in itself necessarily make it unacceptable because you're not putting any more development on there. So you can play around and you can increase the numbers. It's almost about applying the so what test. So what is the harm? What are the issues? It's not just a case of the numbers in itself. So you shouldn't be scared about the density and you shouldn't be scared about the numbers. It's the implications and the consequences of that development. And then obviously as officers, we feel that it's okay and it's acceptable, it meets the policy requirements. But that's why the application is in front of you members.
I think Councillor Selby first. Yeah.
Yeah, I just briefly wanted to say, Madam Chair, we've had the phrase earlier today, not reflective of good design. For me, properties 1, 2 and 3, well, it's the layout of them. It looks, for me, Madam Chairman, it's a pig's ear. I don't like it, Madam Chairman. I mean, the corner of number 3, I mean, how far is that away from property number 2? It just looks sorry, Madam Chair, to use the phrase, but it looks a pig's ear to me, Madam Chairman. And that's what I think of it.
Councillor Cottier.
Sorry, you were talking about reasons, we were talking about parking. What's the policy within the council for parking areas for houses?
Yes, I think Adam can answer that one for you, John.
Yeah, so as a council, in terms of our local plan, we don't have any adopted standards in terms of the amount of parking that should be provided. The county council do have a development design document which does stipulate what they would necessarily expect there to be in terms of parking provided, dependent on the number of bedrooms per property. So I think it's anything up to a 3-bedroom property should have 2 parking spaces, and anything with 4 bedrooms or more is normally expected to have 3 bedrooms or more. What I would say with this one, as I say, is that the county council have been consulted on it and they haven't raised any objections on that point.
Councillor Dilks, thank you.
Thank you. Just picking up on Councillor Reid's point. It's not just, of course, about overdevelopment, that we should be concerned about, or whether or not it is overdevelopment. The 2 of the ward councillors have called this in on the grounds of that it is in breach or does not comply with our local plan policy DE1 on design. And I would ask, does any member, do you, Robert, or any of us actually believe that this application makes a positive contribution to local distinctiveness, vernacular, or character of the area? I would argue that it doesn't. And DE1 also goes on to say that proposals should reinforce local identified. I'm reading from the report, and not have an adverse impact on the street scene, settlement pattern, or the landscape, townscape of the surrounding areas. I'd argue that it doesn't meet that criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Bisnell Singh, then Councillor Wood, and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I also fully agree with what has been said, because regards to being called on the points for the DE1 in a matter of design. To me, I feel this, especially the three plots, 1, 2, and 3, are too close together, cramming more or less. There's no space between the houses. If you think in terms of future maintenance in any way, how would the access or vehicle, no, people that are going to carry out the repair for putting any kind of structures, substructure to support them, can't be carried out. And I think this is overcramming and it's too dense in that particular plot. I would very much like it probably a lot lighter in terms of number of houses in there. Will make it a far better plot for it to be filled in, you know, reflecting the neighboring area. Thank you.
Here.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh.
Yes, Emma just wants to clarify some distances for you.
Thank you. I'm looking at the plans for you, and at the closest point between plot 3, so the corner of plot 3 and plot 2, the distance would be 2.335 meters. So there is room for a side gate down there. Between plots 3 and 4, at the closest point, it'd be 2.95 meters, and between the closest points of plots 2 and 1, you are looking at 4.75 meters.
Those things are only looking from building walls to building walls. There is a fence in the middle of that. So what's the distance between the wall of the house to the fence? It's less, I think it's about a meter.
It looks like there's a gate on both sides. So I don't have the exact measurements, but the gate would be about 900 to a meter in width. So assuming it's roughly equally shared, it's that normal sort of passageway that you would have between properties.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll just say, yeah, I mean, I do think it's overdeveloped. I think the opinion of the committee here is not pleased with the design at all. I think it is out of character, as people have said, DE1. And I think it should be refused. But having said that, I've got to leave now, so. So sorry about that, but I think there's too many things against it, really. And I think we should refuse it, but I'm sorry, I've got to go.
Well, thank you very much for your wisdom, and let's hope somebody else follows it up. Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, John again. Okay. Well, first of all, Madam Chairman, the answer to Councillor Dilks is no problem at all. The answer to you is no. I would agree. Whether or not DE1 actually extends far enough to be out of character, particularly for these three that are over, thought to be not appropriately positioned, I don't really know, but I do feel we are struggling with a decision on this one because of the criteria. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, I mean, you could look at the impact of an extra house. Is the impact felt in that area where there are the three properties fanning, and the impact combined with the trees and the rear gardens? Is that you know, bad design or just not? The two reasons there really, aren't there? Councillor Visnasing, then I think we'll move on to any other issues, and then we'll have proposers. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would say, in fact, I'm minded to propose a deferral this on the grounds of DE1, and with a wish of looking particularly in the plot of 1, 2, 3, if that can be redesigned to reduce it to either 2 dwellings, which would be acceptable. But I think probably the whole site probably need to have a look into it with the view of to have a redesigning or the layout of it. I think 9 houses is a bit far too much for that. I feel this is an over development of the site.
Thank you. Is that a proposal, Harish?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Does anybody wish to second that? And just a moment, Emma needs to say something first.
Sorry, I think when you defer an application for amended plans, you need to be very clear as a committee what you want the applicant to do. Because there's a real expectation that if they've met that request for an amendment, that the scheme will now be acceptable and that you'll be resolving to approve it subject to conditions. I think asking for a vague, can you look at the whole scheme again, goes way beyond the scope of the application. So my advice would be don't defer the application, sorry. If you're that concerned that there needs to be significant amendments that may even result in the reduction of numbers on site, which of course is a change to description, so we'd have to carry out all our reconsultations again, then I think that needs to be a refusal. And we would invite the applicant to engage with us via the pre-app service to look at something else on site. So that would be my advice, would be to not defer, to go for a refusal instead, if that's what the committee wishes to do.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chairman, I'm happy to propose that refusal of this application on the grounds, particularly on DE1, and having heard colleagues, particularly Councillor Reid and others, I just think we should make a decision today. I have sympathy with Councillor Harish, where he's saying the deferment, but I think we should make a decision today for or against, and I will propose refusal of this application on those grounds. Thank you.
Could I support that? But I think we also need to remember I'll say the word properly, arboriculturist consideration, because that's against the application as well. And I'm not saying that in a totally negative way to the application. What I'm saying is that in this application, it clearly states that the arboriculturist is not advising that this is acceptable. So in saying so, it was started at the very beginning by one of the ward members saying it's not that we're against the development of this site, it's what's on this site and the criteria. So to support Councillor Dilks with DE1, if we put the tree condition as well, so that hopefully in the refusal, when this application is represented, then it will take both of those considerations into account. Now, as long as they don't change the design that we get into a situation of the meterage rule of overlooking in the redesign, then we'll be somewhere near probably right with this application going forward. But I would support refusal on those grounds because it's not right.
Thank you. I would concur with that. I think there's the two elements definitely to any refusal on design grounds, and that would be the second element, would be the tree arrangement. I mean, there is a view it could be totally redesigned to have the trees in some sort of publicly managed space on the site, a managed space rather than in private gardens, and the houses better orientated and better placed on the site, to the impact on other residents, albeit the overlooking factor is not a particular reason for refusal, but it is obviously of concern. And I think if we could combine all that into the reason for refusal. So I'm going to ask
Madam
Emma
Chairman,
if
there's one other thing, if I may interrupt. We've also learnt this afternoon about the boundary wall, the boundaries. So we ought to make mention that we are concerned about those, so that when an application comes back, it might take consideration of that concern. Because I haven't listened to a debate this afternoon that actually convinces me that those boundary walls are actually going to be characteristic.
Thank you. Can I ask Emma to make a comment on these reasons for refusal first, and then we'll go for a vote?
So I'll take it in reverse order and deal with the boundary treatments. You shouldn't really be refusing something that could be dealt with by planning condition, and there is a condition that relates to boundary treatments. My advice though is perhaps use an informative so that the applicant is aware that on a resubmitted scheme, we want a bit more reassurance around the detail for that boundary treatment. And it's the one along Croft Lane, isn't it? In relation to the reason for refusal, and I think that it's probably best if the resolution was to delegate to myself as the Assistant Director of Planning to refuse the application. I'll finesse the wording with Adam and we'll agree it through the chairman and yeah, through the chairman. But what I'm hearing is that you're concerned that the design's not in keeping with the character of the area. You're also concerned that this is cramped. And in relation to the trees, you're concerned about the future impact on or the future implications for the trees. So it's not the construction phase, it's what may happen in the future. And because of the pressure around the size of the gardens and the garden spaces, so there's I suppose a lack of usable garden space, that there may be future pressures to have those trees. Now that wording needs to be finessed, but I'm thinking that's the gist of what members have been saying. So if you're comfortable with that, it would be DE1, and we'd pick any other appropriate policies, of course, but it's relating to the design, out of keeping with the character of the area, cramped, and in relation to the trees and the future pressures from the proximity of the trees to the houses and the amount of garden coverage that would be under the canopies. Thank you.
As proposer, Madam Chairman, can I fully accept and say thank you to Emma for that advice, and I hope the seconder would concur with that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So can we go for a vote on that? Councillor Selby, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, I also wanted to say thank you to our Director of Planning for that summary. Thank you very much.
Emma, can I just clarify that other concerns with the cramped nature pick up on there are some elements of parking issues as well as small amenity spaces. Would that pick it up?
That hasn't formed part of the debate. Particularly, you did bring up parking, but there hasn't been, I haven't particularly heard a strong concern in relation to that. And I haven't heard a concern about the amount of amenity space or garden space that the properties have per se. So I think if that's something that you wanted to include, you could, albeit the advice is that the parking is acceptable and that there would be no adverse impact on the highways as a result of the amount of parking that's available on site. And we don't have any standards in terms of garden sizes. So it's really very much a judgment as to whether you think there's enough garden space, but there's nothing to assess it against. There's no standard that says you must have X amount of square meters of garden for a property of this sort of size. So
does the word cramped include that and the way it impacts on the surrounding dwellings, not in terms of overlooking, but in terms of character?
It would be loosely included in the whole, the development is cramped, and it does obviously relate back to the tree issue in terms of those trees on the frontage and the space in particular. So it loosely relates to that, yes, but it's not the same as saying those properties as a standalone reason for refusal do not have enough garden space.
Thank you. So if we would like to go to the vote on that basis, who in favour of the proposal to refuse? And I think that was everybody, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't speak now. Unanimous. Application has been refused. Thank you.
Very much. I don't think we have any other business today. So I'll close the meeting at 3:05. And thank you very much, everybody, for